So Garland Nixon here, and the Ukrainians are getting wiped out in catastrophic numbers. What does that mean for Ukraine in the long term, and what does it mean for the U.S. empire? Let's talk. Hi, Garland here. And one of the things that's being talked about and has been talked about for a while is the catastrophic numbers of losses that the Ukraine military have been suffering. And they have been for quite a while. There's been a discussion about basically, and you've probably heard this from people who know far more about military maneuvers and tactical and strategic military science than I do. And that ain't hard because I don't know anything about that. Who have, said basically, they're calculating, unthinkable numbers of deaths. And these are people, these are human beings. These are not numbers. This is not math. We call it math and we say X amount of thousands died, or this number died in this battle, or this number of brigades, or whatever. We put a, we put a discussion around the fact that human beings are dying. Right. But in reality, human beings are dying. And that means something in a society. That means something to the family of the dead, both symbolically and physically. So let's talk about this a bit. Let's start here. Why the catastrophic numbers, from the Ukrainian military? Here's the first thing I'll say. Look, if you give someone else your car to drive, here, take this car, here's the keys, off you go. Just drive it for a year. A company, let's say Mercedes-Benz says, Garland, here's a Mercedes GLC 7, whatever, right? 4.4, 3.5. It's yours. Drive it all you want. We'll handle all the maintenance with no charge to you, no matter what, doesn't matter. We don't care what happened to that car. It's yours for a year. Do with it as you please. I'm going to put more miles on that car, probably going to drive it faster, probably going to drive it harder. Hey, what the hell? If the shocks, get weak because I drove it over bumpy roads faster, I ain't got to pay for it. They do. And even though I'm the kind of person that likes to take care of my equipment, and I'm likely going to, baby it somewhat. There are those of us, there are people who, if they buy their own Mercedes, they're going to slam it into a wall, because they don't take care of their own equipment. And there's other people that baby their stuff. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I guess I'm a regular or average person. But let's get back to the core of what I'm getting at of this analogy. I didn't pay for that. And I ain't ever going to have to pay for it. And it doesn't matter what happens to it. After a year, they get it back. If I blow the engine in 6 months, they'll take it back and give me another one. It doesn't matter. It ain't mine. There's no price to pay for whatever happens to that car. Do you see where I'm going with this? That's the issue with being the proxy in a proxy war. You see, what we talk about most of the time when we talk about a proxy war, we talk about the two powers on either end of the proxy war, right? We talk about the superpowers are using this punching bag in the middle to punch. And we talk about this is what the Russians are doing, and this is how they're countering the proxy war, and this is how they plan to beat up on the poor little old proxy. And on the other side, we say this is how the U.S. wants to use the proxy. This is what they're going to do. They're going to stick them out there to be punched and say, punch away. And it's almost like this with the proxy war, unfortunately, particularly in this instance, when you talk about a war of attrition. The U.S. basically takes their proxy, which is Ukraine. And on the other side of that proxy is a superpower. Think about the just the inhumanity of what the neocons are doing with Ukraine. Here's what they're doing. We're going to take this proxy and we're going to harden this proxy. If you're in Taiwan, you might want to watch this video. We're going to harden this proxy. We're going to make it, the terms they use with Taiwan is we're going to make it prickly like a porcupine, right? We're going to make this proxy Ukraine very, very difficult. We're going to harden it. We're going to dig trenches. We're going to arm the people. We're going to train the people. All the things we need to make this proxy a hard nut to crack, understanding that the nut's still going to get cracked. Well, that's the problem with the neocons, though. They don't get that. But at any rate, and why would they care? And then we're going to take this proxy once we've hardened it up, and we're going to stick it in front of a superpower and say, punch, punch, punch till you're tired of punching. The concept here is to harden Ukraine, to stick it out in front of Russia. And what do they say? We're going to weaken Russia. What does that, when the neocons say we're going to use Ukraine to weaken Russia, think about it. We talk about whether or not it'll weaken Russia. We talk about whether or not the neocons will be successful, how they're going to go about it. Are they giving them more Leopard tanks, more planes, or triple M777 howitzers, all of that? What happens to Ukraine, even if they're successful, which they're not, while they're weakening Russia? We've gotten this Ukraine thing, and it's good and hardened. And there's Russia. There's our adversary. Now that we've hardened it, let's stick it out there. And then we say to Russia, punch away. Punch, punch, punch till you're tired. We've hardened this thing, and we want you to beat the living crap out of it. I mean, just keep punching, punching, punching until you're sick of punching. And then punch some more, because when you get finished, sure, this thing's going to be a wreck and destroyed and wiped out. Fair enough. We planned for that. But we will be successful if after you finish beating the living dog crap out of this proxy, beating it mercilessly, punching it, elbowing it, kicking it, biting it, like a dummy, like, your martial arts dummy, right? You push this thing up, you elbow this dummy, you punch this dummy, you kick it, you chop it. There's got little dummy eyes. Poke the eyes, chop the throat. Man, you just beat this dummy mercilessly day in and day out, right? Because you want to perfect your craft. That's the part that the neocons didn't think about. Beating the dummy perfects your craft. That's a whole nother story. Maybe we'll get to that. But you want to perfect your craft. And how do you perfect the craft? By beating the crap out of this dummy. That's the dummy's job. Dummies are expensive. You buy a good one, those hard rubber ones that you buy now. It's $350, $400, $500 for a good one, right? Very expensive to get the dummy. Get the dummy and beat the dummy day in and day out, right? And the idea, why do you buy such an expensive dummy? Because you want a dummy that can take a beating. Understanding that sooner or later you're going to wear the dummy out, but yeah, whatever. Who cares? It's a dummy. That's what dummies are made for, to be beaten day in and day out. That's why you bought it. That was your investment. I'm going to buy a dummy. The dummy's going to be beaten. I'm going to beat the dummy. In this instance, they're buying a dummy for Russia. So Russia can beat the dummy day in and day out, right? And, and here's the thing. You buy a dummy, let's say off Amazon. You read the reviews. I wonder if this dummy can last. I want to put my investment in it. I want a dummy that's going to be around a while, right? So you buy it and you bring it home and you beat the crap out of it for a year, and the arms fall off and it starts to dry rot. And you're like, you know what? That wasn't a good dummy. Fell apart. I'll get another one. Taiwan, your turn. Didn't work. Hey, it was a bad investment on that dummy, but who cares? I'll throw that dummy in the garbage and get a new dummy. That's the plan. And that's the plan with Ukraine. Now, the thing about it is, what do you think the dummy would say if the dummy could talk and you said, hey, dummy, how do you feel about this plan? I suspect that the dummy would have some issues with the strategies and tactics that you were using here. He'd say, I'm getting beaten, poked in the eyes, kicked, scratched, punched, chopped, and elbowed day in and day out. I don't like my part in this movie. You know what I mean? This is a play, and I don't like my part. But fortunately for you, the dummy can't talk. So there you go. You beat the dummy mercilessly day and night. And then at some point, what do? You get a new dummy. Well, I think you see where we're going with that also. Let's talk about Ukraine. When the neocons came in, fortunately for them, and I've done a video on this called The Weaponization of Rage in the past. Fortunately for them, they had an ideal dummy, and they're really good at picking out the dummies. So what they did was they came into Ukraine, and there you got the Banderites. They hate Russians and Poles with a flaming, raging passion of a million suns. And of course, they say to them, you hate Russians? Yeah, wouldn't you like to defeat the Russians? Sure, but the Russians are too big and powerful. You can't defeat them. Yeah, we don't like that. Okay, we'll help you. We'll arm you. We'll do everything you need. We'll help you. We will help you prepare for war with Russians, because being idiot ideologues that you are, you want to believe that you can defeat the Russians. And since you want to believe it, you'll act on it. You know, how many times do we see that in life? People believe things that they want to believe, right? Two people are dating, and somebody calls the girl and says, I saw your boyfriend riding around in a car with that swimsuit with the woman who won the bikini contest at the bar the other night. And the girl calls her boyfriend. He comes over. She says, hey, were you riding around with the bikini bathing suit champion? And he's like, yeah, but her car broke down, and I helped her fix a flat, and I was giving her a ride home. Now, she knows that's a bunch of crap, but she really wants to believe it, because if she doesn't believe it, she's got to break up with her boyfriend and realize that she's lost her boyfriend to the chick that won the bikini contest the Friday night at the local bar. She don't want to do that. She don't want to lose her boyfriend, so she believes what she wants to believe, because that's what works for her, right? And there you have the ideologues in Ukraine. Certainly, any reasonable and rational evaluation of the situation would say, gee, Russia's way bigger than us, and they've got much more power, and they're a superpower, and we're a bunch of schmucks running around goose stepping with Hitler tattoos all over us. We probably can't win this one. And that was reality. But because in their ideology, Russians are inferior, intellectually inferior, of course they can beat the Russians, because they're intellectually inferior to them. So you're going to win. So they knew they were going to win because the Russians were intellectually inferior. Forget all of the actual empirical evidence that said they're going to get smeared. Didn't matter. The Russians are intellectually inferior, so they're going to beat the Russians. And the neocons know that. So the neocons come up to them, hey guys, you want to beat the intellectually inferior Russians? And they're like, yeah, but we don't quite have the money and stuff we need. Great, we got you covered. We'll help you. And then at some point, we'll come in. And you know how the neocons always do that. Ask the Kurds about how that works, right? At some point, we'll come in and bail you out, and we'll back you up. And you'll be the leading edge, the vanguard, as it were, against the evil Russians. And then when the Russians start to, you have a tough, when and if, which you won't. But let's just throw this out there and just say you were happen to, get bogged down a little with the Russians. Boom, we come in with the hammer, and you have all of the power of the United States to take the Russians out. And then, of course, the ideologue goose steppers look at that and they say, that's a plan. Okay, now we've got our proxy nation. Now we've got our dummy all ready to get beaten mercilessly. So, and the neocons are ideologues too. So in their mind, they felt that either that possibly they could harden these people up as, they know nothing about the military, all a bunch of chicken hawks. Possibly we can harden Ukraine up so hard that either they can actually tactically they can strategically defeat the Russians, or they can do something that will be considered a defeat. And that is, they can bog the Russians down for a long time. They can do the Afghanistan model where what happened, and this is what they're thinking. The Russians were in Afghanistan for 10 years, and then the Soviet Union fell apart. And it's association being the same as causality. The rooster crows, it's called post hoc ergo propter hoc. The rooster crows and the sun comes up. Therefore, the sun must be coming up because the rooster crowed, right? Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Afterwards, therefore, because of. So the Soviets were in Afghanistan for 10 years. And then a year or so later after they left, the Soviet Union dissolved. Therefore, the Soviet Union must have dissolved because they were in Afghanistan for 10 years, right? However, they also argue the Soviet Union dissolved because the ideology of socialism, communism, Marxism, Leninism ultimately fails, and so the economic model failed. I see an issue here. The Soviet Union failed because it was in Afghanistan for 10 years, and the Soviet Union failed because its economic model is flawed and didn't work. Which one was it? It was both. It was whichever one you need on a given day to justify what you choose to believe. So therefore, for Ukraine, they choose to take the former model, which is to say 10 years in Afghanistan caused the Soviet Union to dissolve. So therefore, all we got to do is create that model again. Remember, the neocons look at history and pick and choose and cherry pick something that works for them so that they can come up with a plan to repeat history. Just like World War II. At the end of World War II is when the United States really came to the prominence as an empire. Now, what was going on at the end of World War II? All of their enemies were destroyed. Europe was at its knees. Most of Europe was like no taller than me, in that all the buildings had been flattened by bombing. The people were on their knees. We had what was called the Marshall Plan. They were begging us for food. The people of Europe were getting, like, all over Europe, they were getting these boxes of food weekly with like a little bit of flour, a little bit of rice, a little bit of fatty pork, things of that nature, because there were no jobs, there was nothing, they were screwed. Slowly rebuilt Europe. That's when the US came to prominence. Japan was flat as a flounder, that had been bombed flat. China was trying to recover. The world was trying to recover from military devastation. But the United States, as they say about the United States, the U.S. is a distant power with a distant land with insignificant powers to the north and south and fish to the east and west. The United States was a long ways away. They didn't get bombed flat. Everybody else was militarily and economically devastated. Boom, you're the last man standing. You're the powerful empire. But the U.S. convinced themselves that it wasn't just because of that. It was because we were somehow intellectually, culturally, economically superior. Again, things that don't go together, but that was okay. So what they want to do now is recreate the end of World War II, not physically. They don't want the bombing, the bombing of Europe, right? Why? Because that could go nuclear and they could die too. What they want is economic devastation, because it works the same. You get the same. The empire was able to rise because of the economic devastation as a result of the physical devastation. So right now, one of the things they're doing is complete economic devastation of Europe. If they can wipe Europe out economically, then they become the last man standing again. They can get a fight going on in Asia. They got these idiots in Japan. They're all ready to throw their bodies into the fire. Set Japan up, set China upon Japan and Korea and all of those places, get them to wipe themselves out. And what do we have? We have recreated the end of World War II, and the U.S. is the last man standing. That's what their whole plan is about, right? And a big part of this plan right now is the introductory part. The thing that gets it fired up is harden Ukraine and take Ukraine and put it in front of Russia and say, punch until you're tired. And of course, once Russia gets tired in this plan, Ukraine is going to be a pile of ashes, right? It's going to be torn apart. So what's going on now? Let's get back to the theme, as it were. Let's get back to the focus of this particular video, and that is the catastrophic casualties. Well, what's going on? The leadership of Ukraine, if we want to use that word, is the same as the leadership of Europe, because what the dynamic that's going on in Ukraine is a physical dynamic wherein they're getting Ukraine bombed flat and they're using their people as cannon fodder. And of course, the same is going on in Europe, only they're trying to do it economically. It's the same thing. One of the things that was very telling recently was it came out that Prince Harry apparently has written a book, and that's, I think, going to come out soon. I don't believe it's come out. Doesn't matter. But he talks in his book about something, and that is he talks about being in Afghanistan and flying in a helicopter gunship and machine gunning Afghans, right? And apparently his number is 25. How the hell? Let's face it, that's a false number. How the hell would you? What do you sit there and count? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. There's one Afghan, two, three, and put little marks on the side of the helicopter. He doesn't know how many he killed, but he chose a number because that number works for the purposes of what he's saying now. So he said he killed 25 Afghanistans, and he goes on to basically say, I see them as chess pieces on a chessboard, as bads that I have to protect before they kill the goods, as if some guy running around in the mountains of Afghanistan is going to get a freaking plane ticket to London and go stab some person in London. The people in Afghanistan are defending their land from crusaders and invaders, and they got a right to do that. And if the Afghans came by the tens of thousands flying around over London, London would defend itself, as it should. So that's all colonial rhetoric, right? That's Joseph Borrell saying that the EU is a garden and everybody else out there is a jungle, and therefore we have to protect ourselves from the jungle. In reality, what is that? It's colonial jargon for we need a cover story so we can go to these countries and steal their damn resources. What do you think? It's an accident that the bads always happen to be in countries that are loaded with oil and gold, and it's been said on numerous occasions that Afghanistan has literally trillions of dollars in rare earth minerals and minerals that are needed. So here's what happens. A country like Bolivia, for instance, discovers all of this lithium, and now they say, wow, we want to build electric cars and stuff like that. Get rid of gas stoves. Everything has to be electric. Therefore, we need lithium for the batteries. And we never heard of Bolivia, but all of a sudden they got a lot of lithium, 40% of the lithium reserves in the world. Yeah, we got to go in there and straighten this country out. We got to stand up for the Bolivians. They need democracy. They need this and that. So here's what happens. When they look at a country that has some things that they want, the colonial powers say, first and foremost, we need a cover story. We got to go in and steal that stuff, and we need a cover story to get it. It's democracy. It's the bads over there are coming to get us. It's something, whatever. It's just a cover story. It is to justify to their population why they're going halfway across the world to kill a bunch of brown folks and steal their crap. And in Russia, they just don't happen to be brown, but they still got a lot of stuff. So that works. The Russians are going to be honorary brown folks for the purposes of this, because, while I say brown or black folks, the bottom line is this. First and foremost, do you have stuff they want? Yeah, good enough. They want to take it. And they need a cover story to tell their people. In the instance of Ukraine, the cover story is democracy. An innocent country has been an independent, sovereign country with a great super guy named Zelensky is out there, and we must defend these poor people. Is there a Nazi or two running around? Sure, but that's overblown. Here's what kills me. There's Nazis everywhere. And I'm like, really? Everywhere there's Nazis. Everywhere we look, there's Nazis. Well, you told me you hated Nazis, and you told me you wanted to root them out, and now they're everywhere. So you went from anywhere there's Nazis in the U.S. military and white supremacists, and we must find them and root them out. There's not anywhere there's Nazis, we must find them and root them out. Okay, there's lots of Nazis in Ukraine. Well, I mean, come on, Nazis are here, there, everywhere. Let's just accept the existence of Nazis. Let's just, understand there's going to be Nazis. You know what I mean? Things happen in life. There's different people running around. We got to respect different cultures and traditions. Nazis are people too. You know what I mean? They goose step a little bit. They say Sieg Heil. They don't really bother anybody. In fact, sometimes you can ally with Nazis. You just overlook them and just move forward, right? They kind of changed for some reason from Charlottesville, where the Nazis are the most evil creatures on earth, to, Nazi smotsy. Let's overlook. Now, why do we always have to talk about Nazis? That's, it's not that big a deal. Let's change the conversation. Look at all the wonderful things in the world we can talk about. Which, bottom line, it's always about the cover story. It's always about the cover story. So let us continue. And they were exposed, and they were never opposed to Nazis. If they were opposed to Nazis, then why did they help, arm the Nazis? Why did they bankroll the Nazis in Europe, if they were so opposed to Nazis. They set up the Nazi regime in the Third Reich as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. And that plan did what neocon plans always do. It fell apart and backfired. That's all it was. Think about that. This is 1930s Germany part 2. They a bunch of Nazis, and they armed them, and they bankrolled them, and they helped them, and they did everything, and then it backfired. Now Ukraine, hey, what do we got there? A bunch of Nazis. I got an idea, a unique idea. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to arm those Nazis. We're going to bankroll them. We're going to get them all straight, and we're going to use them to fight the Russians. Now, granted, the last time we did it had a few slip-ups. 1 or 2, maybe a couple 100 million people died. And, okay, fair enough. But this time, for sure, it's going to work. This time, we have learned from the errors that we made in the past with Nazis, and this time, we'll just deny mostly that they're Nazis and things like that, and we'll just outright arm them and stuff like that and stand off at a distance. Yeah, they're Nazis, they're our Nazis, and this darn time, we will not be embarrassed about it. Last time, we had to pretend that we didn't arm them, we had to pretend that we didn't bankroll them. This time, we're going all out. Hey, no shame in our game. We're coming out of the Nazi closet, right? We're coming out of the Nazi closet. These are our Nazis. World, look at us. Here we are. We're out of the closet when it comes to Nazis. That's what the neocons decided to go right this time. That's all they did. That's all they really did. This time with Nazis, they came out of the closet. They opened the closet because, let's face it, there was a whole lot of Nazi skeletons in that closet already. They opened the door and out poured the Nazi skeletons. They armed the Nazi skeletons and they said, look at me, world. Here I am. Well, the world's looking, and the Ukrainians are getting mowed down like cordwood. And here's the issue with the catastrophic losses. Let's get to the catastrophic losses. Number one, at some point, there will be a reckoning in Ukraine. If you think about the numbers that they're losing, right? We heard a number several months ago of 100,000, and that, I believe, and many people believe, was very, very low. But the numbers in Soledar alone, a small town, the numbers coming out of there of how many people were lost in the defense of Soledar is upwards of 7,000 to 10,000. Keep in mind that Bakhmut, the term has been used as a meat grinder. They just keep throwing soldiers in and throwing soldiers in. Now, again, as the puppet master of the proxy, again, here's the problem. You don't own the car, so why not slam it into a tree? Why not drive it over a train tracks? Why not do anything? Why should you ever wash it or clean it? Why change the oil? Why do anything? It ain't yours. Run it until it falls apart and then go get another car, right? From the perspective of the neocons, they don't give a damn about the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians' their job, this is their job, to weaken Russia. How do they weaken Russia? By getting ripped apart by artillery, by getting machine gunned, by getting slaughtered mercilessly. That's their job from the perspective of the neocons. We got a bunch of bodies, Ukrainian bodies, and until such time as we run out of Ukrainian bodies, which is an obvious eventuality, we will use them for our purpose. And our purpose is to weaken Russia. So people talk about this Bakhmut or Soledar or wherever the hell from the perspective of military and tactical strategies. Well, you shouldn't do that. Why are you defending this land? Or why are you defending this area? Or, as I've talked about self-defense, right? Some guy comes after you. Do you stand in one spot? You're not defending that spot. You can move left. You can move right. You put a wall to your back. You can get in a corner so nobody can come, or you can come out of that corner. You don't want to be cornered. You can spin around and get this guy in the corner and attack him in the corner. You're not, if someone attacks you, you're not defending a particular piece of real estate. You move, shuffle left, shuffle right, go forward, go back, make this guy move, make this guy think, right? He's got to punch a moving target, right? So from a perspective of defending yourself, you're going to move. You're not bottom line is this. Think about this. This guy attacks me, right? I want to do damage to him. I don't want to stand here and say, I've got a little square block of 2 meters by 2 meters. I'm going to stay in this block and I'm going to defend this block. Whatever happens, I may be beaten mercilessly to a pulp. I may be killed, but this little block of turf on the ground, I'm standing in front of. No, my job is to hurt him. I want to take his eyes out. I want to kick his groin. I want to stomp his feet. I want to hurt him, right? I want to damage my opponent. Maybe I'll break some fingers, snap a wrist, hyperextend an elbow, something like that, right? I want to injure my opponent. Therefore, I don't have to defend any turf if my opponent can't fight me, right? You attack me instead of defending this little square ground. If I break your wrist, you got less weapons. If I break your other wrist, how are you going to attack me? And you're in terrible pain, right? That's the plan. Damage the opponent. Don't protect the turf. Besides, if I get an opportunity, I'm running. I'm fleeing. I'm leaving that turf. But you may have cornered me. Maybe I can't. Maybe I'm home and you've come into my home and attacked me. Whatever the case may be. But I got to injure my opponent. Got to put pain on my opponent so my opponent doesn't want to fight or can't fight or is disabled, right? From the perspective of the Russians, that's what they're thinking. I came to Ukraine not to defend or take Soledar, but to knock the bloody hell out of the Ukrainian military. So if it happens to be in Soledar, fine. Bakhmut, good enough. There are those who disagree with me on this, but I tend to think there are those, and all of this is all speculation. There are those who I think highly of who disagree with me on this, but I tend to think the Russians may have never, ever been in a real rush to take Bakhmut. Now, again, this is sheer speculation, blind speculation. I could be wrong. And those who disagree with me may be correct. But I'm just throwing this out there as a possibility. Maybe they were never in a rush to take Bakhmut. Maybe Bakhmut was the reason they were calling it a meat grinder is, you know why you buy a meat grinder? To buy meat. You know, I remember when I was a kid, my dad had a boat. And on the side of this boat, he had a meat grinder with a little handle. You know why? Because we would anchor the boat. And we would take these fish called alewives, menhaden, right? They're a very oily fish. You drop them in, you anchor, the tide's moving, right? You drop the fish in, you grind them, and these are frozen fish. You grind them up, and these oily, fishy stuff goes into the water. It draws in called striped bass, rockfish, big old like this, man. Just all you want could we catch, right? And you would see the water start boiling with these fish. And you would just take a little piece of that menhaden and put it on a hook and just drop it down. And as soon as it disappeared out of your sight, wham, you had a striper like that or bigger, right? Big 10-pound catch up all day long. It was a lot of fun. But the purpose of the meat grinder was what? To grind up the fish, right? They're calling Bakhmut a meat grinder. I always start talking and I get, taken away with analogies, but whatever. But the purpose, here's my point. The purpose of a meat grinder is to grind meat, right? And albeit a horrifying metaphor here to refer to Bakhmut as a meat grinder, the Russians knew it was a meat grinder. That's what they set up. The U.S. kind of knew, but they didn't care because, hey, they just wanted to keep this thing going. So I do believe, maybe I'm wrong to some extent, that part of what the Russians were doing was setting up a dominant fire zone where they had a small area in Bakhmut, a small town, where the Ukrainians, at the behest of the Americans, would continue to feed soldiers and war material into this small fire zone, and they could continue to put fire on that fire zone. Boom. As long as you keep putting meat in the grinder, I'm going to keep turning the wheel. And I think that's what Bakhmut was about. Now, again, that means catastrophic losses for the Ukrainians. But from the perspective of the U.S. neocons, they don't care because that's the neocons' job. And as far as they're concerned, yeah, we're losing lots of Ukrainians, but it's killing time. The Russians have to continue, they're going to lose some soldiers. They're going to use up all of their weaponry because, let's face it, they've been running out of missiles since the day one they were out of missiles. So they're going to run out of missiles. They're running out of artillery shells. They're running out of everything. The Russians are going to run out of stuff killing Ukrainians. Imagine if you're a Ukrainian and the plan from the other guy is they're going to keep killing you guys till they run out of weapons. You're sitting there and they're saying, attack, but we'll all be killed. Yes. But sooner or later, if they keep killing you guys, they'll run out of weapons and we'll win. Yeah, but I don't win because my job is to be torn to shreds by the hundreds of thousands until the enemy runs out of weapon. That don't sound like much of a tactical and strategical plan that's going to work out on my behalf. It wasn't meant to work out on your behalf. That's been your job all along. Now, that being said, as a short-term plan, it ain't a good plan. As a long-term plan, it's an even worse plan because at some point, the the reality of what's going on will hit home in Ukraine. And I think it already has. See, one of the things that has to be discounted here is any agency for Ukraine, any reality that Ukraine is in fact a nation, a society, a culture. Part of it is because the neocons have spent a long, long time ensuring that the Ukrainian culture was first and foremost anti-Russia. First and foremost, very, very pro-Nazi, because pro-Nazi in and of itself is anti-Russia. Those two things are go together, right? If you're a Nazi regime, it's axiomatic. It is self-evident that you're going to hate Russians and oppose Russia. So the U.S. was definitely supporting making Stepan Bandera a national hero, building statues after him and his ilk, and naming roads after him and all these things. They were all for that, brainwashing the young people and the children. Why? Because that helped to create a society to hate Russia. One of the reasons that Russia had to go in, because Russia knew they're just building a Russian society to hate us and want to murder us. This thing ain't going to get better. We're going to have to either go in here. This is the patient is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. Either the patient's going to die and spread this disease over to us, or we're going to go in here and we're going to knock this illness out now. I think that's what the way the Russians saw it. I think they saw themselves without a choice. So the U.S. built Ukraine up, and now the people of Ukraine have been, if you talk to people, you listen to Gonzalo Lira and listen to what's coming out of Ukraine. The media in Ukraine would make Joseph Goebbels' work look like child's play. So day and night, the media in Ukraine, what's left for those who actually have some way of, turning on a television because they got electricity, the people are being told day and night, we're winning. We're winning. The Russians are falling, blah, blah, blah. But apparently what I'm reading is some of the people are starting to ask questions. I've said this for a while. Forgive me if you've heard this before. At some point, entire towns, entire regions are going to say, when are the men coming home? And in this instance, the old men and the teenagers. At some point, entire regions are going to say, hey, government, got a question. When do the men come home? Now, keep in mind something. That's a problem with ending the war. You can't really end it. What happens if you negotiate a settlement? Right? Okay, we got a negotiated settlement and it gets out everywhere. There's a negotiated settlement in all of these towns and villages across Ukraine. Let's say they're happy. Yay, the men are coming home. They've got a negotiated settlement. Woo-hoo-hoo. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. You know what I mean? All of this stuff, right? And then they're going to say, all right, we're going to have a parade when all of the men and the older men and the fathers and the sons and the teenagers come home. Let's get ready for the parade. And they're going to have a parade and ain't nobody going to show up. And they're going to say, hey, government, we got a question. When are the men coming home? We had our parade. We let you know the parade was going to be on Saturday. We had a parade for the heroic men, albeit it may have failed, but they stood up against the Russians. We remember, we watch TV every day, how they defeated the Russians in Soledar. They knocked the crap out of in Bakhmut and Severodonetsk and all the places. Oh, they just pounded the Russians mercilessly, and they put it on those Russians day and night. We know that because we're listening to the radio, we're watching TV, and those Russians were on the run day and night. And we've got, a hero's welcome for all of the men that are coming home all across our region. We know that maybe the buses were late, or the weather was a little bad. Maybe they couldn't go through the mountains, things of that nature. But so let us know, when do the men come home? And the government's going to be like, oh yeah, about that. The men coming home. It's what the men. Oh yeah, we'll get back to you on that in a month, or maybe a year, or maybe a decade, or maybe never. Because all that crap we were telling you about beating the Russians and crushing the orcs and blah, 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 well, it wasn't 100% true. Might have been 100% false, in fact, and they ain't coming home. Never, 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 never. The teenagers that we sent, that generation, yeah, wiped out. The men in their 30s and 40s, the productive men who work in a society and have children and get married and all, yeah, they're all gone. Oh, well, what about the men in the 50s and 60s that you sent? Surely you left them we were told they were going to be on the back and they were going to be loading trucks and things of that nature. When are they coming home? Ooh, yeah, the men in their 50s and 60s. When are they coming home? Maybe they're caught up. They'll be later than the others. I'm thinking they'll be home. You know what they're going to do? You know how when they ask Pfizer and they're like, when, can we see the documents from your trials and stuff like that? And Pfizer was like, 66 years, and when they asked, there was something else. Oh, Seth Rich's laptop. You, in other countries, you may not know about the whole Seth Rich story, but apparently we found out that the FBI has his laptop, and they've been pretending that they don't. And the court people went to court and they said, hey, can we see the laptop? And the FBI said, yeah, but it's going to take us a little while to go through the data. Can you give us a little bit of time? And then we'll get back to you on the data on Seth Rich's laptop. And the court said, how long do you need? And the FBI said, about 66 years. Everybody who wants to know will be long dead by then. And just like the CIA papers for the death of JFK, when that 66 years actually does come about and the next generation is alive and they say, can we see it now? We're going to say you still can't see it. Well, that's what's going to happen in Ukraine when they ask about the 60 and over. What about all the men with gray hair and aluminum walkers and canes that you threw in a battle? How they make out against the Ruskies? I think they're going to figure out the answer to that question. And the people all across Ukraine will wake up one day and realize there ain't no Ukraine. You see, my friends, we talk about Ukraine and the future of Ukraine from the perspective. But let me say this. When I say the word Ukraine, right? And, the Hindus talk about this. Zen talks about this. When I use a word, when I say garland, what do I mean when I say garland? Right? Garland is a sound. I'm not Garland. Garland is a sound that we've decided, that my mother decided we'll use the word Garland, and that'll refer to this guy, to this schmuck here. So when you say Garland, you're referring to me. But I could change my name to Bill, couldn't I? The other people have nicknames for me. What's up, G? That's still me. That's a sound that they decided that me. So when you use the word Garland, what are you referring to? When you use the word Ukraine, what are you referring to? Are you referring to the landscape, the physical landscape? Are you referring to the industry? Are you referring to the economic structure? Are you referring to the people? Are you referring to the culture? When you use the word, are you referring to some conglomeration of all of those things? So when you talk about what's going to be left of Ukraine, what will Ukraine look like? People say, will they have access to the sea? Well, what they're talking about then is the industry of Ukraine. Hey, look, if you're going to grow stuff, if you're going to make stuff, you got to get it the hell out of there, and you need access to the sea, access to Odessa. So they say, will Ukraine have access to Odessa? They ain't talking about those people. Keep in mind something. When you talk about Ukraine, let me give you an example. When you talk about Harvard, right? When you talk about whatever, the University of Baltimore, right? The University of Baltimore, what do you mean? Well, 20 years ago, the University of Baltimore had different students. It had different buildings. It had different professors, but we still called it the University of Baltimore. We're talking about a field of activity. We're talking about a process. We're talking about a pattern of activity and a field of activity and words and names and things of that, where it is. You could move the University of Baltimore. Well, it's here. We're going to move it? We're going to move it outside of Baltimore. but we're still going to call it the University of Baltimore. You're talking about a field of activity that you refer to as the University of Baltimore. When you talk about Ukraine, bottom line is this: you could move the borders of Ukraine, you could move them back, and you still call it Ukraine. You're talking about a field of activity, but within the context of that field activity is a certain number of humans. And that, my friend, is going to be dramatically changed after that war. Think about this. So when you say what's going to be left of Ukraine, I tell you what ain't going to be left of Ukraine: Ukrainians. Not Ukraine. You're going to have Ukraine. Imagine this: Ukraine without the Ukrainians, right? It's like you talk about a country. Imagine this: if in the middle of the Sahara Desert, where there's like sand, mostly sand, you cut out an area in that desert. You cut out an area. Imagine if the British had just cut out an area in the Sahara Desert where there's nothing but sand, nothing but sand dunes. There is nothing can grow, nothing can live, nobody, nothing. And they said, we're going to name that the country of Smabibia. What difference would it make? There ain't nothing there but sand. It is the country of Smabibia in name only. It is the country of Smabibia. There's a field of activity in there, in Smabibia. But there ain't no people included. There's no industry included. There's no aviation included. There ain't even animals included because it's too hot and nasty for anything to live. It's just sand, but we have called that area of sand Smabibia. That's a country, isn't it? It's a country in name and name only. People could have a war. I want Smabibia. No, Smabibia is mine. Let's go to war. Hundreds of thousands have died in the war for Smabibia. But in the end, there ain't nothing in Smabibia. It is a word that refers to a clop of sand. Well, that's the context you have to think about when you're saying, what is Ukraine going to look like afterwards? They're already talking about this. What's Ukraine going to look like afterwards? Well, we think the Poles may come in and take this area, which will move the borders in this way. Now, of course, the Hungarians, they have a historical claim to this area. They'll move in here and they'll take this area. And by the time you get finished, Ukraine will be roughly the size of, I don't know, a small neighborhood. And let's say Long Island. A small neighborhood in Long Island that we'll call that Ukraine, where there's like 5 people and some sheep, and we'll call that Ukraine. Doesn't matter, because the term Ukraine refers to something. And one of the issues that we have to consider here is the human part of what's going to be called Ukraine. That human part's going to look dramatically different, my friend. Dramatically different. Let's start here. A whole lot of Ukrainians are out of there. They've gone to Western Europe. Where have more Ukrainians gone? What country have more Ukrainians gone than any other country? Russia. I'm suspecting those are pro-Russian Ukrainians. That what you had areas of Ukraine that were away from the East, that were dominated by the nationalists and the Banderites, where the Russian-speaking people, the ethnic Russian people, their lives weren't so hot in the first place. They weren't feeling very safe. This thing happened. They're like, great, we're getting the hell out of here. They're out and they're in Russia now. But now, as Russia takes territory from Ukraine and from their perspective, repatriates it into Russia, these people can go back to those territories. Russia's building all kinds of stuff in Mariupol and all these kind of places. And guess what? There's houses there back with those people, and they'll happily go back because they're in Russia. They're where they are. And guess what? They've got decent pensions if they're old. They got, there is a lot in the area of Ukraine that Russia has taken. You got lots of wheat fields, you got industry, you got steel mills, you got all kinds of stuff. There's going to be jobs there for them. And you know what? Russia ain't broke. The idiots over here, through their economic war, has driven up the price of commodities that Russia sells. Russia's got money. Russia's going to say, go back there. If you're old enough for a pension, we'll give you a pension. If you're not, we're rebuilding the industry. You'll have a job. You can have a job rebuilding things. That's work. Rebuilding things is work. You can eat. You can come back here. We'll make sure you eat. And where before you were getting shelled and mistreated, we'll protect you. So you're going to have a job, healthcare, food, a place to live. The Ukrainians who went to Russia are coming back home. The Ukrainians who went to the EU, not so much. Why the hell would they want to go back to that godforsaken hellhole? And guess what? And a lot of people that left were women and children and things of that nature, right? So they're going to try to stay in other parts of Europe, and that's going to cause a whole lot of problems. That's a whole nother video. The Ukrainian refugees is a whole nother video, but let us continue, because what we're talking about is the casualties. So now we get back and we ask ourselves, all wars come to an end. Conflicts come to an end. There's been some that have lasted for hundreds of years, but this one ain't. And I suspect sometime in 2023, this will end. And as I said, I have said time and time again, I believe this one ends in collapse, and in a collapse of the Ukrainian political and military structure in a way that the West is not going to be able to prop it up, because there ain't going to be nothing left to prop up. So the West is not, they're not going to be able to go in and reinforce the Ukrainian military and reinforce the Ukrainian political structure, because if that stuff collapses, there's nothing to reinforce. If you come to a house and that house is on fire, if that house burns all the way down to the foundation, there ain't nothing there for you to prop up or fix. You got to start from scratch. I think that's where they'll be. And what's left of Ukraine, the parts that the Russians don't want, or don't choose to take, don't choose to overrun, right? That will be what we're talking about. And that's the areas that hate Russians, the Western areas that the Russians don't want. Nobody really does, maybe the Poles, that the US has turned into a Russian hating place that's going to be impoverished and broke and cold. They're going to be pissed. Here's my prediction. They will be angrier at the Americans than they are at the Russians, because they're going to wake up and they're going to realize they've been lied to by the Americans. They're going to be madder at the Europeans and the West. They're going to realize, now you'll get two groups of them. You'll get the hardcore Nazis who will be angry, and they'll say, if only you'd have supported us more, if only you'd have given us more weapons, given us more, joined us in the fight, you let us down, you backstabbed us, you're worse than the Russians. Well, those are the people that will commit terrorist acts against Western Europe. That's coming. But you'll have another group who will be angry at the Americans, and they'll say, we've been took, hoodwinked, lied to, misled all along. You told us we were winning. You told us we couldn't possibly lose. And now all the men, boys, all of them dead. Every single one of them never going to come back. And let me add this. In this, what's left of Europe, what's left of Ukraine. Let's just say, for the sake of purposes, that somebody mentioned BlackRock. Okay, BlackRock's going to rebuild whatever. That ain't what they do, first of all. BlackRock is an extraction company. They don't come into your country to rebuild it. They come to pick the bones of the skeleton. If BlackRock comes into Ukraine, or what's left of it, it ain't going to be to rebuild Ukraine. It ain't going to be to help Ukraine. It's going to be, there may be some meat left on these bones, and we're picking it clean. And if they see any industry, they're going to move it back to the US, because they're going to deindustrialize Ukraine in the same way they're deindustrializing Europe. And if they're going to come in and they're going to say, is there any industry left in Ukraine? And people are going to say, oh, thank God BlackRock's here to rebuild the industry. Yes, we've got a plant right over there that builds widgets. They're going to say, great, we're taking that plant, we're moving it the hell back to the US. But what about us? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you guys. Yeah. Oh, yeah, kind of sucks to be you. Toodles. Bye-bye. So all they're going to do is come and just pick the bones and rob whatever's left of Ukraine. Rob it blind. That's what BlackRock does. You don't want these kind of vultures. There's a reason they call them vulture capitalists, because they pick the bones of anything they can get and leave a skeleton. And that's what's going to be there. So meanwhile, let me add this. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that somebody came in to Western Ukraine after this and said, we're going to build a widget factory. Who'd work there? They'd have to have all women, because the men are all dead. Where are they going to get? You need a workforce. No workforce. The workforce was thrown into a meat grinder. They're not going to have a male population left over of any consequence. And might I add, let me add something. If you got 100,000 dead, 200, 300, which we're looking at, that means probably 3 to 1 injured, right? The other thing that Ukraine is going to have is a gigantic population of men with no arms, no legs, a foot blown off, blind, can't hear, mentally incapacitated, and you know how the neoliberalism is. In World War I, they called it shell shocked. And now there's been, transitions of names from being shell shocked and all the way to now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. But in World War I, it was shell shocked. And let me tell you, what did it mean? Why did they call it shell shocked? Because in World War I, World War II, why was it shell shocked, right? Because if you're standing around and artillery rounds are dropping all day and night, tearing your friends to pieces, and every now and then you get hit by a piece of shrapnel, or a piece flies by your freaking head, and you barely survive constantly. At some point, when you get out of there, you're going to be friggin' nuts. So they were shell shocked. That's what they called it. Well, now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, bad news, Ukraine. The guys that do come home are going to be either ripped to shreds or insane or some combination of both. So what are you going to have? A workforce full of guys hobbling around with one leg, blind? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to pay for a society where you've 40 million, I think it is in Ukraine, something like that, right? Where 20 million of the country is probably left. And then another, let's say 3% of the country is either dead, 3 to 5% is dead or mangled. And of your productive male working population, right? Of the men who would work in steel mills, who would build things, of that population, you have taken all of them, everyone you could find, and thrown them to the front. So of that productive working male population, that population, 50%, let's say this, 50% of your workforce is dead or mangled, wish they were dead, right? Mangled, destroyed, and mentally incapacitated. That's what you'll be talking about when you talk about Ukraine. You'll be talking about a fundamentally dysfunctional society. And so what you're going to have is now, and let me add this. And what do they need? What do guys need whose arms and legs are blown off, who are blind, who are deaf, who are, have their teeth blown out of their mouth, disfigured, burned, you name it, right? What do you need? You need caretakers. So now you're going to have a society of people who need 24-hour service. See, not just can they not productively work in a factory, they literally need someone to take care of them. I'm talking about post-war. I'm talking about the results of this country being used as a proxy war. We're looking at a country that has been torn to shreds when it comes to Poland's taking this part, Hungary's taking this part, Russia's taking this part. And what do you think? Any of them are going to not going to take? They're going to look for the good parts. They're all going to say, it's like when somebody says, there's a cow's being slaughtered. I want the steaks. I want the flank. The poor guy left that gets the cow lips or something, right? The poor guy at the end, the impoverished people get the worst part of the cow. Now, I don't eat meat, so I don't get any of it. I'd be eating, I don't know, salmon or something. I'm a pescatarian. But of the people who are surviving off of this cow, the guy that's left gets the cow tail. That's what he gets. He gets the cow hooves. He gets to make soup out of cow hooves because there ain't no meat on cow hooves, but that's all he's got. So he's got to make some soup out of it and put some, hopefully, season it up a little bit and have cow hoof soup. Well, guess what? That's what Ukraine's going to be left. It's going to be cow hoof soup. The people who can take all the good parts are going to take all the good parts. That where you can grow stuff and where you can have access to the sea and things of that nature. What's going to be left is going to be a slump of barren, desolate, cold land with a bunch of people whose arms and legs are torn off, and those who aren't, their minds are going to be mush from sitting in the middle of a field of artillery day and night for the last 9 to 10 months. What a disaster. This thing will be left, and it won't be able to take care of itself. So what do you have? Oh, might I add, and they're going to be pissed because the US and the EU, in their perspective, did this to them, abandoned them, didn't help them beat the orcs, however you want to put it, right? So there's one other part. All of that is bad enough. But these angry people in this broken society are going to be heavily armed and really pissed. That's a bad combination. They're going to have all of these billions of dollars of weapons left, and they're going to be pissed. And they're going to say, and they're going to be broke and poor and pissed. And what do you know about poor areas? I'll put it to you like this. Go to an area that's really, really poor that doesn't have a lot of crime and violence. You ain't gonna find that from a guy who was in law enforcement for well over 20 years. Let me tell you, when you go to the rich neighborhoods, there ain't a lot of desperation and violence. You go to the poor neighborhoods, there's a lot of desperation and a lot of violence. When you talk about terrorism, a lot of times in terrorist areas, why? You've got economic desperation, and somebody comes in and says, these are the people that caused this economic desperation in our region. Let's go get our revenge. Here's a gun, and somebody goes and does it. They feel like they got nothing left to lose. As James Baldwin said, the worst thing a society can create is a man who's got nothing left to lose. And there are going to be a whole lot of people with nothing left to lose, and they're going to have all kinds of arms, and they're going to have people that they want to pay back. And I suspect they'll be heading west, my friend. You think ISIS was pissed? You think the Middle Easterners were pissed, and they'd stand on the corner with a knife and jump around and knife a bunch of people on the streets of Paris or on the subway? You know, last time I was in London, this was before London was what it is now, which is kind of, you know, a zombie apocalypse movie. But back then, it was still pretty good. And it wasn't that long ago. A couple of years ago, I'm in London, right? I go to High Street and I go to these, you know, really nice stores and just wander around and look around and, you know, really enjoyed myself, talked to friends, stopped in cafes, had tea and biscuits, you know, the stuff you do in London. I went back to my hotel room and, I'll tell you what, in fact, real quick, I was there the weekend when they were celebrating Brexit. That's what I was there. It was 2018, maybe, just before the whole COVID thing. And they were, you know, that night they had this big Brexit celebration, and I was there for a number of outlets. One of them was Fox. I did took video and did a shoot for Fox to go back to this TV show I was doing in like New York, New Jersey area, right? And Sputnik, I covered it for them, Pacifica. So I was there for a number of news outlets hanging out in London. And so I wandered around that time. You know, London's great. And what was even better, there was a Julian Assange event. I went there and had fun, and Alexander McCorris and Assange's dad, Mr. Shipley. Oh, it was just fantastic. I had a good time last time. London's always wonderful. Back then it was. So at any rate, I say that all of that to say this: go to High Street, go back, get up the next day, doing whatever the hell I'm doing. And what do you know? I turn on the news, and the very store that I was in, some bastard took a knife, grabbed the knife, and stabbed 3 or 4 just random people wandering around. Boink, 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 stabbed them. One of them died. I thought, good God, I'm glad I wasn't there. I better watch my back, right? The good thing about it is, though, because of my defensive training, the biggest part of training is situational awareness. So it would have been hard. I mean, saying he wouldn't have got me, but it wouldn't have been easy because I'm always looking, man. I'm always looking. My eyes are always open. You're really going to have to be good to get me, but I'm not saying you can't do it. But my point being this, look, it's wrong. People should not grab a knife and go stab random strangers. I think we can agree on that. However, that's blowback, man. The US and the UK went to the Middle East. They cut the countries all up and with weird borders that ran through tribal lands that had been thousands of years. They overthrew the governments repeatedly. They bombed Libya, Iraq, you name it. They're screwing with the people now. They're destroying Lebanon's economy. They're doing all of these things in the Middle East. And somewhere in the context of all of that, some Middle Easterners are getting pissed and coming to Europe and picking up a knife and stabbing random strangers. I'm not into stabbing. I'm not saying that I approve of random strangers being stabbed because I could have been one of them. I'm just saying that's the kind of blowback that happens when you go and you destroy an entire region. So that being said, all they had was knives. These people are going to have shoulder-fired anti-tank missiles, handheld anti-aircraft missiles. They're going to have machine guns. They're going to have everything. And a bunch of them are going to have swastika tattoos all over their bodies. And they're going to be pissed at the Western Europeans. And there will be hell to pay. The only thing that the Western Europeans will have on their side is there ain't going to be many of them. Well, I'll put it like this. The ones who were able to get out, who ain't going to want to go back, some of them will be pissed, and some of them may be able to start cells of Nazi terrorists, of vanilla ISIS as they call it. They'll be able to start things like that. But there's going to be hella pay, and it ain't going to be knife attacks, my friend. It ain't going to be knife attacks. They're going to be hitting buses with anti-shoulder fired anti-tank missiles. They're going to be getting on the rooftops, machine gunning people like ants. They're going to be planting explosive that they got. They're going to, you name it. If you gave it to them, the U.S., they're going to use it, and they are going to use it against Western Europe. I mean, think about it. This war, let's say the war goes on a year or two. I don't think it goes, but as I said, I think it ends up in collapse with Ukraine. Ukraine can't go on forever. Collapse. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's give it 2 years. Okay. And the U.S. is still, here's the problem, still pumping weapons, pumping weapons, pumping weapons. Let's say this goes on for 2 years, right? At the end of that time, man, there's going to be a lot of weapons. And let's face it, as many Ukrainians as are getting wiped out, in the numbers they're being wiped out, by the time 2 years comes, there will not be a Ukrainian soldier left. I mean, how long can the Ukrainians keep doing this? How long can they keep feeding the meat grinder? They're losing. I mean, how long can you lose hundreds of people a day, battle after battle? You can't keep this up. So at the end of this, the catastrophic level of casualties will create fury, unimaginable fury in the Ukrainians that are left, in both the women and children who have lost their fathers, who have lost their sons, who have lost not just their father or son here, entire towns and regions. Everybody left that lost their fathers and their sons. Entire regions absolutely wiped out. Entire generations. We're seeing generations in Ukraine wiped out. And the neocons are sociopaths and psychopaths. They don't give a damn. And besides, it's Europe. Going to be hard for them to get over here. Remember, the U.S. is way over here. We are separated by thousands of miles from Europe. So the U.S. feels that they don't have to pay back anybody, but there will be some payback coming home too. But as has been said over and over, we are a distant power, bordered on the north and bordered on the north and south by insignificant countries, and bordered on the east and west by fish. And so the payback is going. That's why one of the reasons the neocons don't care. The payback is going to be mostly in Europe, and they really don't like Europe anyway. I put it like this: they are aligned with the UK. The UK is part of this empire. They don't like the French and the Germans. They don't like the Poles. They don't like any of them. So as far as they're concerned, throwing the Ukrainians into the wood chipper, into the meat grinder, throwing the Europeans into the economic meat grinder, they hate them. They hate them. The Europeans are at the mercy of people who can't stand them. That's the interesting thing about it. They're like, the Russians are evil. The Russians are coming to get us. You got that backwards. The Russians ain't got nothing against you. Well, they didn't. Now they do. But my point is, the Russians ain't got nothing to do. The Russians were like, hey, France, Germany, can't we just be friends? Can't we all just get along? They were doing the Rodney King thing. Can't we just get along? And the French and Germans are like, oh, you lowlife Russians. The Americans are our friends. You guys are scum. And the Russians are like, okay, have it your way. And they're like, Americans, don't you love us? And the Americans are like, God, we hate these people. Oh, God, we hate these. How can we get rid of these bastards? We hate these people. But yeah, we love you guys. Just shut up and do what you're told. Continue. Keep up the good work. By the way, while we're doing that, we'll be transferring your industry back here and impoverishing you. So just keep up the good work, guys. Keep it up. Good work. We got you. We're behind you, and we're covering the Ukrainians at the same time. Way to roll. I'm telling you, so what we're looking at is a military and social and generational catastrophe for Ukraine, an economic. It's going to be generational. The same, actually, Europe is getting the same catastrophe, but I think it's not going to be physical, in that the people aren't going to be machine gunned. But poverty creates the same types of death. You're going to have people in the long term. You're going to have poverty, and poverty creates crime and disease and all the other things. So Europe's going to have lots and lots and lots of deaths. They're going to get the same kind of deaths visited upon them. They're just going to get it visited by a different specter. The guy who's coming to Ukraine to kill all the people, the the guy with the black suit and the sickle, the specter of death, is coming with a machine gun and an artillery round. The guy who's coming to Europe is going to have tuberculosis. He's going to have crime. He's going to have venereal disease and sexually transmitted disease because of all the prostitution and the human trafficking and things of that nature. They're going to get the same thing. They're just going to get a different variety of it in the long term. But the Ukrainians now, that's it. That's, I guess, if I had to sum it all up, as it were, that's how I would sum it up. I would say what we're looking at here is a generational wipeout, genocide in Ukraine, and it's being done by the United States. And I'll say this: people are going to realize what happened here. There's going to be people coming out of Ukraine. There's going to be soldiers that come off the battlefield that write books and talk about what happened. There's going to be maybe generals. There's going to be people high up in the, at some point when Ukraine collapses. Keep in mind something, and this is important, and that is, when Ukraine collapses, Ukraine has been a fundamental, and the United States heavily contributed to that, to this, a fundamentally corrupt society, right? And the United States contributed to that because they needed a corrupt society in order to carry out their evil plan. But in a corrupt society, there's a saying, you might have heard this saying, any port in a storm. When, at the time that Ukraine falls, and the politics fall, the people who are in power are going to be looking for a way out, and they don't care which door gets them out. So you're going to have some very, very powerful people, some high people, and Zelensky could be one of them. If the Americans don't, let's just say if Zelensky doesn't meet an untimely demise, but let's just say he doesn't. You think the Americans should trust this bastard? Do you know what Zelensky would do, or the people around him would do, if the balance of power changed? The government collapses, the Russians come in, they're all in power, and they're surrounded and everything. People around Zelensky are going to call the Russians, because this is what happens in a corrupt society. They're going to say, look, hope I wasn't out of line with all of those cracks about you guys being Untermenschen and orc and things of that nature. Things happen in war. Maybe people say things that they're sorry for. Hey, it happens. Let's put these things behind us and move forward. However, I got an offer for you. How would you like to know it all? I got emails. I got letters. I recorded shit from Jake Sullivan and all of these other Ed Sullivan and whoever the hell, right? I got recordings. I got everything you need to show that the United States were lying, cheating, violating you name it. I got all of I need, Russia. The only one thing I need, what's that? Protection. Take me to Moscow. I'm a corrupt guy. I need babes. I need money. I need all kinds of things. But if you give me that, I'll hand you the neocons on a silver platter. By the way, it's not just me. I'm representative of some other very powerful entities in this country. I'm just representing some people. And I'm just here to say, if you were to want more information, I may have other people that might be willing to work with you. And the Russians are going to say, we'll send over some FSB guys to pick you up and talk to you. You're under protection. You're ours. The FSB would pick this guy up. Hey, what do you know? You look a little dirty. Here's some new clothes. Hey, you thirsty? Yeah, get this man some nice vodka and some borscht. Do you like borscht? Yeah, borscht. Yes, borscht is yours. The finest borscht we have. Come on, we'll put you up in a nice hotel. Life is going to be good. You're our friend now, guy. You're our friend. We really like you. And about your friends, give us the names. We'll go pick them up. They'll go pick them up. They'll bring them in. They'll give them new clothes. Hey, your tooth looks like you might have a cavity there. How about we handle your dental work? No problem. Done. We'll send you to the fine. We're going to take care of those guys. They're going to dress them up. They're going to give them 3 hots and a cot, as they say. And they're going to say, now what you got for us? We'd be willing to give you money. We'll give you a new name. What you got family? Yeah, we'll bring your family in. We'll give you a home. We'll give you a new name. You know how the intelligence community works. What do they give a crap? Russia's got unlimited money coming in from oil stuff. They're going to bring these people in. They're going to give them money. They're going to give them whatever they want. Give us the goods. And those guys are going to give them the goods. They're going to flip. They're going to flip, flip, flip like a trampoline artist at the Olympics, over and over and over. So at some point, you think Elon Musk heard them and give them the inside goods at Twitter? That ain't nothing. When the Ukrainian military falls, when the Ukrainian politics falls, the people who are left in power, they have no duty to the neocons. In fact, they may be pissed at the neocons. And even if they ain't, they don't care. They're looking out for numero uno. It's a corrupt society. And you're going to see a whole lot of people say to the Russians, okay, you're in power. Yeah. Okay. I'm down with that. Now, I'm good with that. You're in power. How can I make this work for me? You're in power now. They were in power before. You're in power now. Let's figure out how I can make this work for me. Right? WIIFM. Everybody listens to the same radio station. What's in it for me? And when that government falls, the corrupt people in that government will go to the Russians and say, how can we work this out in my best interest? And the Russians are going to say, what do you got, bruh? What do you have? And they got a lot. They got a whole lot. So on the ground, the U.S. and its empire is going to have to deal with the fact that they've wiped out a whole generation and they got a bunch of angry people, and they have people who want to give up information. They're going to have people coming off the front who want to give up information and write books and etc. about how harshly they were treated on the front, about how corrupt their leadership was, how the U.S. mercenaries were there and they were saying, my God, we're all going to get wiped out. And the U.S. mercenaries were standing there with the Azov battalion saying, you better go in or we'll machine gun you in the back. And they were saying, my God, if we go in there, we'll all be torn apart by artillery. And the U.S. mercenaries were there saying, do it anyway. That NATO was, they're going to tell everything. NATO was there. NATO, they're going to tell everything. The guys on the field are going to tell everything. The women back home are going to be infuriated because all of their sons and fathers were wiped out. And it's going to be a 3-level disaster. And the political people who are fundamentally corrupt are going to say, how can we make this work for me? And the Russians are going to say, give us the goods. And they're going to say, hey, you think you know about those bio research labs? You don't have the real stuff on them. And we do. What are you paying? And the Russians are going to say, well, we're paying you in rubles, but what do you got? You tell us what we got. We can work out a deal. And the Russians will work out a deal, and the Russians will look out for them. Well, but the Americans will kill us. You don't worry about the Americans. You see, Edward Snowden's all right, aren't you? We'll bring you in here. Moscow's nice this time of year. A lot of discos. You can come in here and dance around. You can listen to music. You can have a nice drink. A lot of pretty girls running around in short skirts. Trust me, you're gonna love Moscow. So all you got to do is give us the goods, and you'll have money, you'll have protection, and you'll have a nice life in a cosmopolitan city where, you know, we actually have heat and things of that nature, unlike some areas of Europe where they're having difficulties with those types of day-to-day amenities. I'm telling you. So that's the 3 things. The political structure and the people in politics are going to sing like canaries, and they're going to provide information and empirical data to condemn the neocons to the world. The military people are going to sing and say, this is what happened on the battlefield and it didn't work out to our interest. The people on the ground are going to be furious because you killed their fathers, sons, and brothers. And a lot of the ones that are already in Europe are going to be mad. They're going to create terrorist cells, and they're going to paybacks are going to be hell. 3 levels of hell are coming as a result of them wiping out generations of Ukrainians and throwing them into the wood chipper. That's the way I see it. May be wrong, but that's the way I see things. All right. Well, we got 2,800 people, so hopefully there's 2,800 likes. Let's go. We're going to start by going through the super chats. Number 1. Elia Cazares says, USA is a bigger country. USA is a powerful country. USA decided to invade a smaller country called Mexico. So basically, that's wrong. Kamala Harris. Yeah, that's funny. Kamala Harris is about as bright as a wet match in a dark cave. All right. Not a lot of super chats, but we'll keep looking. Maybe there's another one. Maybe not. I'm looking. 1 super chat. Oh, there's another one. And Roland Egger, super sticker. Thanks a lot, Roland. Certainly appreciate that. Roland is doing his thing, helping out. Thank you, Roland. He didn't have a question. I'm looking. We got 2 super chats. That could be it, but that's okay. Oh, see another one. I see green. Gee, I am not celebrating MLK this year. Last week, a 22-year-old black teacher visiting LA was killed for no reason by LAPD. Enough is enough, done, bro. Yeah, that was pretty much unthinkable. That's America, man. That is, I look at the police in America in the same way that I look at the American military around the world. They go to countries and they occupy the countries and they're kind of brutal. And there are a lot of people in the US that are like, no, we must support the police. There's not an individual law enforcement officer that's bad or good. It's that the US ruling class sees the police as something that is to defend them and protect them from the working class. You're talking to a guy that was in law enforcement, that retired as a major, that worked for the governor's office. I was appointed I was a police official. Trust me, there's a lot of things in this world I don't know. One of them that I do know is law enforcement. Super sticker. A name that I'm really having trouble with, and I'm going to call it with Naboya Bjorleborg. Man, that is an awesome name if you're in America, because you don't have a clue what that means. How about we go with Gayla Mikhailova? Was MLK a communist? Your take? Well, Martin Luther King. I'm glad you asked that. Martin Luther King said he was a democratic socialist, but when you talk about ideology, I would be happy, since you did a super chat, to explain. Martin Luther King was what the South Americans are, right? So, and I'll say this: why is it that South America? Why is it it's countries that are South America's? They consider themselves Bolivarian socialism, etc. Why is it that they align so well with Russia and China? Let me explain what we're talking about. They use words like democratic socialism, things of that nature. Okay, what is it that aligns here? What ideology are we talking about? Having traveled in South America, having talked to people there in small villages and towns, and traveled around and looked at the society and talked about people that are experts. Let's, as an example, Venezuela, Bolivia. What is it that these people want? They want a couple of things. Number one, they want a democracy. They want to choose their own government. Keep in mind what drives them. What's driving them? I'm glad you asked me about MLK. What's driving them is neoliberalism. The United States, with what was called the Monroe Doctrine, believed that they controlled all of the countries of Latin America, and that the countries of Latin America were nothing but U.S. colonies, and they were not allowed to have democracy. They were not allowed to choose their own government, their own ideology, their own ways of life. The U.S. had to choose it for them and would use violence to make sure. So what is it that they want? Bolivia, they got a lot of lithium and gas. Venezuela has a lot of oil. Here's what they want. They want democracy. They want to choose their own government. They want democracy. They want to come together and write their own constitution. However, here's something that they want. And think about Russia. They want, let's say they've got lithium and gas in their country. They want to nationalize the lithium and gas. What the socialist part that they view is this: that the gas, the natural resources of the country should not be extracted by corporations for the profit of corporations. That the natural resources of their country agree with it or not agree with it, I'm going to explain it to you. I know this stuff well because I've traveled to talk to these people. They believe that the natural resources of their country belong to the people, that the government should have a gigantic country like a company like Gazprom or Rosneft. Sound familiar? So that the government extracts the resources. The government sells the resources with a nationalized country. Citgo was the company in Venezuela. And that money is then used to fund the government, so that people either have no taxes or very low taxes. And that money is used to create a very robust, what we call social safety net. Free houses for the poor, free healthcare, free electricity, free water and amenities, and all those kind of things that you don't pay for. That's when they say Bolivarian socialism, when they say socialism in South America, that's what they mean. That's why they align with Russia. Because Russia is a little bit more of a market version of the same exact thing. Russia's got low taxes, right? Russia is building, keep in mind, Russia's built really, really fast. In 23 years, they've gone from like dirt poor to a economically viable country, to say the least. But how did they do that? Rosneft, Gazprom. They have companies, they have lots and lots of resources. Instead of allowing ExxonMobil, there's a whole story on that we could go on. That's one of the reasons the Europeans are pissed at them. The Europeans said, why don't we come in and extract your oil and gas with our companies and we'll blah, blah, blah. And the Russian says, oh, no, hell no, that ain't happening. The Russians said, we'll create our own companies that are nationalized companies. We will extract the gas and the oil and the lithium, and all the things that they create. We'll sell it. That will be considered owned by the people, right? That money will be used to fund the government, fund the military, fund everything, and we won't tax the hell out of the people. Now, look at China. What's China do? China does that with its industry, same thing. So what you're looking at is this. You're looking at an ideology that aligns in South America, in Russia, in China, and that's what the Africans want to do. That's what the Middle Easterners want to do, right? Think about this. Saudi Arabia, what does Saudi Arabia do? Aramco. It's the same damn thing. Aramco is a nationalized company. The Aramco extracts the oil, the government keeps the money. That's what they use to run the country with, right? So why the hell do you think that when it comes to this whole mess going on in Ukraine, that Saudi Arabia is aligning with Russia and China and South America and on and on and on? Because they have the same governmental economic ideology in a way. That's what Martin Luther King was. That's the brand of socialism. Keep in mind something. When you say socialism, communism, etc., you ain't talking about one particular thing. There are various, you could say there's a band of different ways from one extreme to the next. They're not every communist or socialist or Bolivarian socialism or whatever are exactly the same. And Russia falls within that spectrum in that they have nationalized all of their natural resources and they use the money from their natural resources to fund the government so they don't heavily tax the people. There are those people, me, who say, look, would it be a bad idea if instead of ExxonMobil and all of these mining companies in the U.S. keeping the money, that the U.S. had a company like Gazprom and all that gas that's coming out of Texas, all that oil that's coming out of everywhere, all of the gold and all of the things that are coming out of mines, all of the things that are coming out of natural resources were used to fund the United government and the U.S. government, and they didn't tax the hell out of us. And all of these companies that we are funding and that we are giving subsidies to already in any way, we're actually giving them money instead of money coming to us. Would that be a bad thing? And my taxes disappeared. And now Americans pay no taxes. How much better would Americans be off if they paid no taxes and instead the government actually sold all of that stuff and we got the money? So, yeah. So when you talk about was King a socialist, is Cuba socialist, is Nicaragua, Bolivia, Venezuela, it's a much broader discussion than they have in the United States, which says simply communism and socialism is evil and capitalism is bad. Well, right now, look at the United States economic model. Who the hell in the world? Go look around. Homeless camps everywhere. People are poor, losing everything. It is an economic disaster. $31 trillion in debt. Who the hell in this country in this world wants to imitate that? That's another reason that our strength is waning, because people are looking at it saying, man, I don't want to be like them. I'd rather be like the Russians and the Chinese and the Saudi Arabians or whoever the hell, anybody but them, because that's a disaster. All righty. Anyone, let's see. So that was a lot, but I wanted to answer that question. Thanks a lot, Honey Bell, for the super sticker. And some more. Thank you for linking that documentary, informative and relevant to a child of Vietnam vet. My dad was a lab tech affected by napalm. Government didn't care. You got that right. Thanks a lot, my friend. JF super sticker. Thanks a lot, everyone. Is there a gagging order about the amount of body bags? Oh, you know it. You know, yes, lover of the Russian team. You know they are doing everything they can. Okay, so let's see any more super chats. No. Okay, we're going over. We got one or two folk on Rockfin. Thanks a lot, Keith Alcock. Oh. Thanks a lot, JVB. We're going over. We got another one. And that is Takfa Azul. Azul, that's blue. Takfa blue. Algeria has Sonatrach, a nationalized oil company. There you go. You're seeing countries saying, and I mean, I don't claim some ideology. Oh, I'm a capitalist. I'm a socialist. I'm this. I don't need a name for ideology. You know what? Whatever's smartest, that's what we should do. Whatever works the best for the people, that's what we should do. So I don't claim an ideology, but I do say we're starting to see a pattern where countries that have nationalized their natural resources and sell them and consider their natural resources to be owned by the people, aren't taxed to hell. How about we start there? And they're not taxed to hell, and they're able to use that money for a robust a social safety net. So, is that a bad idea? I don't care what you call it. That's the thing about me. I don't need a name. I don't care what you call it. Thanks a lot. See it. And I think that is the long and short of it. I want to thank everybody. Wow, everybody's out today, 2,600 people. So we should have 2,600 likes in everybody. Couple of things. You see everything going across the bottom. We got patreon.com/Garland Nixon for those who can afford. If it's $5 a month, if it's $10, if it's $100 a month, if you can afford to support and help the channel on patreon.com, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Buy me a coffee. If you don't like Patreon, it's buymeacoffee.com/Garland in. And for some reason, they stuck an H on the end of that. So it's /Garland in H. You can buy coffee. You'll go there. You can do buy me a coffee to help support the channel. Of course, follow me on Telegram, Patreon, and we've got and my Cash App information is there. Rockfin is very important, and here's why. You've probably heard this spiel along again, but you'll hear it again. Rockfin is very important because it's a free speech platform, and the way things are going, they may throw my butt right off of YouTube, as I've been often on Twitter and often on Facebook more times than a few. If they throw me off YouTube, Rockfin is a free speech platform with no advertisements. How great is that? I've been in contact with the people on Rockfin, the people who run it, the people who own it, and they're like, Garland, say what you want. We don't care what it's about. We ain't cutting you. Just don't threaten to kill anybody. But you know what I mean? Within reasoning. But they're like, man, you can talk about what you want, whether it's the you know what, or whether it's Ukraine, China, Russia, doesn't matter. Talk about it. And so Rockfin is fantastic. No advertisements. How great is that? So go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Totally, completely free of charge. You don't have to pay anything to be a member. However, there is an option. There is an option, since it's a free speech platform and they have no they don't have any advertisements. They got to do something to eat, right? You could become a subscriber. A subscriber is $14.99 a month, but if you join for a year, they give you they give you 2 free months, so it comes out to $9.99 a month. Is what it comes out to if you join for a year, and that helps keep Rockfin on the air, since they don't have any other ways of raising money. Since they don't do advertisements, they provide a fantastic free speech platform. And since they ain't going to, I'll still be there if they toss me off of YouTube. So I'm a big proponent of Rockfin. If you could be a subscriber, and what that subscriber does give you is every Wednesday morning, Eastern Standard Time, from 9 to 10 a.m., I do a 1-hour show with Scott Ritter for subscribers. And so if you become a subscriber, you do get that 1-hour show. I do like 15 minutes of it on all my platforms, so everybody can see the beginning, and then off we go to Rockfin. So that's what you would get. But mainly it's, you get that subscribers, and you can go see anybody's channel as a subscriber. There's lots, everybody's Duran, everybody's on there. When people do premium shows, all creators do 1 premium show a week. You can check that out if you're a subscriber. So if you can be a subscriber on, can afford it on Rockfin, highly appreciated to keep the platform going. If not, just become a member if you can't afford it, and enjoy everything on it if you can. All right. How about Trevor Lynn Gale says, cat back on fall 2023. Great show, G. Thanks a lot, everyone. I think that's it. I think we are done. I think our evil work is done. James says, thanks as always, James Boyajan. And Keith Alcock, I think why do I say my evil work is done? I'll tell you why. This is just I like to tell little stories. And my favorite, when I was growing up, my favorite cartoon was a cartoon called Johnny Quest, right? And so when my daughter was little, I introduced her to Johnny Quest, and she liked it. And one day she's in there watching Johnny Quest, and I walk in and I see this old guy laying in a cave. And I said, well, who's that? And she says, well, Daddy, That's Dr. Zen. And he's dying. And those people sitting next to him are his daughters. And when he dies, they're going to carry on his evil works. And I said, oh, isn't that nice? I said, well, hopefully when I die, you'll carry on my evil works. And she said, Daddy. And I thought that was funny. And so now that's one of the reasons I tend to say I'm done my evil works. Just recall that. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Oh, by the by, I will be on Moat, the mother of all talk shows, with the one and only George Galloway today. So check out Moats. I'll be on there saying something, God only knows what, but I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm always happy to go on with the one and only brother George Galloway. We got to love George Galloway. Peace and love. Oh, I don't want to miss one. Please, Garland, discuss the current situation in Syria with Syriana analysis. Yes, I've been interviewed by him. I need to contact our guy, Kevork Almasian, and do that again, too. Thanks a lot, everybody. Garland Nixon is out. Chicken Patty. We can't go out without thanking and Chicken Patty and Coop W and, of course, the one and only Kinky and on and on. Thanks a lot, you all. Peace. I'm out.